Welcome to Mama Drama Trauma Academy. Today we are course correcting the cognitive conditioning of negative self-talk. Welcome to MDT Academy. This is Tammy, your manifestation muse, and this is where the inner work of healing the mother wound empath takes place. I'm glad that you're here in this early springtime situation we have going on, with our first eclipse being a lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses usually follow solar eclipses, so yet another unique aspect of this year moving forward. Today's question for Great Mother is, how do we nudge negativity and the negative self-talk out of our body-mind? How do we do that? The body-mind, of course, is that heart below energy, that heart chakra, that crossroads between the ego and the soul, that ego body, heart below, and the heart and soul energy, heart above energy, is the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth chakras. We're going to be delving into that question with our reading today. But first, we're going to define our terms, and we're going to go over exactly what the root of the issue is with us and negative self-talk. The Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck is a gentle, loving, irreverent way of connecting yourself to your feelings so that you can learn to trust your intuition. Yes, we are divine, but we are also human. Learn to live in loving detachment from all of the conditions that make you feel detached from that divinity. It's within you. You see it in everything else. For empaths with the mother wound, go to mamadramatrauma.info. There are 3 disclaimers. Number 1, use self-awareness when determining how, when, and with whom you apply this information. It is your responsibility to use it according to what you know is true for you and about you. 2, if you are in any form of mental or emotional therapy or in a doctor's care, though imparted tips, tools, and techniques are proven as effective supplements to formal care, what is offered here is not intended to replace it. If you are at any time triggered, pause the session and resume once you've regulated. And 3, while Mama Drama Trauma Academy specifically speaks to empaths with the mother wound, absolute accuracy is not guaranteed, nor are results of healing sessions, information, communication, video content, consultations, and sessions with me, Tammy Taylor, or anything on the mamadramatrauma.info website. All content is created for educational, spiritual, and entertainment purposes only. We're continuing on with our Everything Empaths series. And today, our topic, nudging out negative self-talk, is the first of a 2-session piece inside of that series. You know, in The Wizard of Oz, we talked about Dorothy Gale in our last session about hyper and high sensitivity as being the poster child for Mama Drama Trauma. And We know that she is because with the support of her angels, guides, and ancestors, she healed herself now. We do not heal ourselves. Never, ever. No one heals autonomously. We are always supported by our angels, guides, and ancestors at the very least, and what I like to say at the very most. We know Dorothy was an empath because, one, she listened to and followed her intuition, symbolized by Toto. She observed and reflected on the support offered by our angels, guides, and ancestors. Secondly, Great Mother's spirit team. She also observed and listened to them, symbolized by Glinda, the Good Witch, the Tin Man, the Lion, and the Scarecrow. Number 3, we know Dorothy was an empath because she acted in accordance with divine law, symbolized by Oz. And fourthly, the Wizard of Oz plot, storyline, the scenes are the narrative in the 6 suits of the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck. Great Mother downloaded to me for a daily healing practice for mother wound empaths like myself. It works, not just based on me, but in the many years I've worked as an inner work life coach specializing in Mama Drama trauma. I have observed the miraculous results of working with this deck. So just like you and others, I've used to struggle with debilitating negative self-talk, not just that ordinary self-doubt we all have as human beings, or even the occasional triggered self-sabotage, but that toxic self-talk of shame, blame, and guilt that kept me in the MDT trauma loop, that until I asked for and received help in the form of the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck and started working with it to live in loving detachment from Mama, the drama, and the trauma, I was going around and around and around in it. So that's what we're dealing with today. The root of the issue is rage. Rage is suppressed anger. There is a lot of anger around unacknowledged lack of maternal protection, provision of care, and presence. We generally either were in such appalling and dismally destructive situations growing up that are not spoken but understood to cause trauma, to be so bad, to be traumatic, or as many of us as empaths, we don't even recognize we have MDT because that's not our situation at all. That kind of excessive abandonment and abuse. But it is simply that for most of us, we did not receive the love that we needed to feel protected, provided for, and the maternal presence that we needed to feel safe and secure. And that's key with mother wound empaths because we never acknowledge it, because being empaths, we feel so deeply for others. We feel that I could not possibly be suffering from the mother wound. I didn't have a horrible upbringing. I didn't have a lot of abandonment and abuse issues or experiences or anything like that. What the heck? No way. And it is the heck, and it is yes way, because we need to understand that it does not require extensive abandonment and abuse. It simply requires for us not to feel that we received the love that we needed to feel secure. This is important for empaths because of our high sensitivity we discussed in our last series. So, want to catch up on that? If you're new here, welcome to MDT Academy. Over this double session, we are going to cover the 8 techniques to nudge out negative self-talk by breaking down the 8 primary challenges mother wound empaths face in overcoming toxic programming, to take our power back, to live our divine birthright, to be happy, healthy, and whole. It's all about energy allocation. Now, I know everybody's ready for the 3 types of mother wound empaths, but before we cover that, there are major reasons we need to delve into this double session first. The questions that session will bring up. Mother wound empaths who are conditioned with this inner voice, this toxic inner voice, it leans toward this negative self-talk. To survive and to cope with its effects, we become expert readers of our mother's energy. So before we can talk about the 3 types of empaths and how we use energy, let's be clear. Because the way mother wound empaths, before we are healed, consume toxic energy, we need to be clear about what kind of energy we're talking about that we're reading, because the healing goal is to transform our intuitive capacity into reliable ability, which is unavailable to us to the extent that we need it just on an everyday basis. What we contribute to our environment in terms of absorbing energy, bringing feelings of safety and calm is not quantifiable and is usually not acknowledged, least by us. And so we want to be kind of clear about how we are allocating our energy and how aware we are of it as a general concept. Because when we are unaware of our energy allocation, we tend to have these occasional intuitive experiences that we hold on to. And although they might be quite powerful for us, and of course they came along in times when they were extremely useful, not doing the inner work to cultivate that voice and to release patterns of shame, blame, and guilt leaves us with little evidence our intuition is correct on a consistent basis. And we typically know that we are hit and miss. And so this has to do with the negative self-talk that we are allocating our energies toward perpetuating. And this is unconscious. This is unintentional, which is why this is so important to go over. The 8 primary loops of confusion, the emotional pain of cognitive dissonance that we have and dysregulation caused by our exaggerated startle response. So, negative self-talk parts 1 and 2. Today is the shadow and the shadow work of course correction. This is today about the tools and techniques to recognize and unlock trauma blocking. Okay, so this unacknowledgement of unmet maternal needs being the foundation of what is blocking the rage underneath that needs to be expressed and released in order for us to gain the clarity that we need is what we're talking about today. Next time in part 2 is the shadow and the shadow work of trusting our downloads. But first we need to be course corrected from using the 8 lunar phases that align with the process of toxic release. Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey illustrates Dorothy's healing journey and how the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck works to recognize our shadows and do our shadow work. investigating deeper into the root of negative self-talk, rage. There is a madness MDT induces, a fear or more of a humiliation we endure, are silently taught to ignore, and when necessary, dismiss, because when expressed, all hell breaks loose and nothing is ever the same. So imagine already feeling insecure and unsafe and being presented with the prospect that your soul contract is to evolve in self-love and spiritual independence to the degree that would require such expression of what we know. Imagine the aftermath of MDT acknowledgement and what that looks like, what that feels like, what life would be like. Because we imagine the aftermath of MDT acknowledgement to be destructive, it destroys. Because we frame our pain as insignificant and bothersome based on conditioning, we spend our lives dodging feelings of unworthiness and insignificance and wonder why it faithfully remains the core of our existence. What if the courage to acknowledge MDT pain and the rage it engenders is what the condition is intended to foster? What if the very people who have it, you and I, could see the lack of power we feel in our lives actually hides the fact it is being applied to maintaining the madness of MDT? Where are we focusing our energy, our power? What if we knew? What if an army of MDT aware healing individuals, practitioners, therapists, and coaches with the tips, tools, and techniques they needed to safely support people with MDT reverse the loss of power? Could we reimagine heaven and hell? Would we succeed? Today's course gets to the root and the foundation of this quandary of, on the one hand, being dearly loved divine children of the great Mother, Father, God, who's never judged, condemned, or left alone, as a core belief empaths possess, and the cognitive dissonance of that core belief and actually living with MDT. All of it's perpetuated and sustained through a continual shame, blame, and guilt gospel that keeps us in the loop of negative self-talk. How do we get out of it? Let's begin. The shadows and shadow work of nudging out negative self-talk begins with light and darkness. So if we imagine the night sky, when you are outside at night, you will either see the waxing moon, where there is lunar effervescent light outside to the point of just the crescent, all the way to the full moon, bright night, or the dark night, which is the dark moon, which is right before the new moon, where you cannot even see the hand in front of your face, depending on where you live in the world, and how much artificial light there is. And there is just enough light to see yourself walk to where you need to go. That is the darkness. And so we're talking light and darkness. In the deck, that is represented by the white background of the cards or the black background of the cards. And of course, if you have the earlier decks, this is going to be represented by the new to the full moon phase of the waxing moon and the waning to the new moon phase of the waning moon. So what you want to realize first and foremost is that shadow work has to do with those shadows, that darkness. Whenever those cards show up, the waning to the new moon cards, those are always where the great mother voice of yin internal energy is coming through with the shadows. And we're talking in part 1 about chakras 1 through 4, the root chakra to the heart chakra here. So we're going to do the 8 tools and techniques, part 1, part 2. And part 1, starting here with the shadows of the root chakra, having to do with that feeling of unsafety, feeling insecure. Here we're talking about the issue of negativity being conditioned, us actually being taught how to feel about ourselves based on us being diverted from what we knew. And today, what we know, that something is not right, that something is amiss, but we do not express it because of our needs for survival and our need to get along as empaths, not cause too much conflict, and all of this that is causing anger and rage being pushed down. That's root chakra. And so all the way down to us putting our safety and security above what we know on a higher level to be true, and it's unspoken. So what this does is it reinforces unworthiness. So those triggers that we have in that suit, the primary issue with rage is that it always triggers a sense that we are insecure about whether or not our mothers love and care for us. And so we're always trying to prove that. This is propagated into all of our relationships. It is replicated. And so we're always trying to prove our worthiness to other people. Those triggers that come up for us. Also, the fears associated with that rage, having to deal with the insecurities of assuming others don't care for us or others don't want us. This is where the negative self-talk takes root. It's an insidious seed that sprouts wiry roots that are very, very strong. And so rage is suppressed anger. This anger is coming from fears that our needs are not going to be met. The fears cultivate a sense of a lack of care for us, a lack of provision, and this is caused by us being unworthy. So when we are looking at the root chakra and that shadow, what we're actually dealing with is desire attachment. So we're angry because we desire our needs of protection, provision of care, and presence to be met by our birth mother. What Great Father comes through and says as the law card of the acknowledgement suit, the root chakra suit, acknowledging the rage, is the law of mystery and divine order. So he comes through with the light of the release moon, the light of the third quarter moon that says it's time to let go. Every time Great Father comes through with the light, that is the shadow work. So what we have to do to let go is we have to recover a sense of our healing intent, that is why we say that we are not really able to heal MDT until we are ready, able, and willing. So it's important that we get to a point where we establish within ourselves a very clear healing intent. And that is part of the acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is the release of denial. So what Great Father is asking us to do is to let go of any and everything that's keeping us from acknowledging the rage that we have so that we can establish our healing intent. We're going to have a lot of rage until we don't. And so it's not a bad thing. It's not something we want to just hurry up and get rid of, but it is something that we want to acknowledge so that we can address our attachments. This is very important in dealing with negative self-talk because while we are on the continuous loop of telling ourselves that we are unworthy, that we don't deserve things, what's happening is that we're unable to own how we've been and how we mother ourselves. As long as we're projecting our needs and our frustration outward, we can't clearly see what's going on inside of ourselves. And this is very difficult to do and impossible for a lot of mother wound empaths to do because the pain is so intense. The experience of the pain is so intense. It's just blocked there. It's just crystallized there. But if you are able to actually imagine for a moment that the mother, the birth mother, the adoptive mother, the mother that has transitioned, whatever mother you are identified with, is only one variant form of great mother energy, albeit an important one, especially this lifetime. Mind you, you may have been her mother in another lifetime or her husband or whatever, but this lifetime, that's very important. If you can imagine for a moment, she is not the only source of great mother love, that the best source is you, then we are beginning to uproot the rage. And so that's what we want to do. And our first technique is to uproot the rage. And how we do that is by acknowledging first and foremost that we have been in denial about having it so that we can accept that we do have it and that we are engaging ourselves in a conscious process of recognizing how we have been using our own energy to protect, be present for, and to provide for ourselves. And for many of us, we have not acknowledged how exquisitely well we have done those things for ourselves and others our entire lives. Many of us have been parentified to the point where we don't even think about it. We take care of everyone, including our parents, our mothers, so much. So first and foremost, we need to recognize, and Great Mother came through with that message in our last session, actually, to recognize our work. But that is the first thing, that is the first tool that we're looking at here. In the darkness of the shadow of rage, the shadow work is to uproot it by releasing the denial and establishing a healing intent that is focused around ourselves, focused around our abilities. Now, this is the first step in our hero's journey because the journey starts off with recognizing that we are in a loop, right? Remember the tornado that Dorothy was in? If you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, please do, because it is the foundation of the deck in terms of really understanding the beginning, middle, and the end of this healing process that we go through throughout our days and throughout the months and years of dealing with issues such as rage. It will tell us where we are in relationship to it. And the first step of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, of course, is the call to adventure. This is the disruption and the awakening that the acknowledgement of denial does. Now, oftentimes we feel that when we have this awakening, we have to shout it from the mountaintops and let everyone know. And although that inevitably will happen, it is not the best thing to do in the beginning. In the beginning, the best thing to do is to establish that truth within ourselves, to begin to work with that truth within ourselves. And oftentimes, as we do, it becomes apparent to others. The issue will bring itself up. Just in the course of living our lives every day, the stronger that we get with our acknowledgement that we are being called on a healing adventure. The first step in the hero's journey is looking at this adventure as something that's going to take us away from that loop that has us captured between our divinity and MDT, that cycle of shame, blame, and guilt. Our desire attachments, being attached to the unchallenged and unexamined beliefs that we have around the sanctity of motherhood. Unchallenged to the sense that we know that we are worthy of being loved, we are worthy of care, but if we are not feeling it from our mothers, then something is amiss, something is remiss, and we do not have to have intuition to know that. Although we've all been blessed with it, empaths have an inordinate capacity to access it. But when it has been defiled through repeated negative talk, verbal abuse, then it's something that we really have to look into and really have to be clear about. So, the main reasons that we want to be clear as we go on our call to adventure is that we really need to just know for ourselves that even though we are empaths, we are working with the definition of individuals who accurately read others' emotions. How do we know that to be true? As we receive this call of this adventure to actually deal with this rage. And again, none of us heal alone. So if you need additional coaching support or you need therapy, you certainly want to do that, because this is a perilous journey in terms of how you're going to navigate these emotional waters. How do we know our intuition to be true? You know, it would be great if we could just trust our intuition, but it has been so compromised that we don't know if it's true. It's hit or miss. So what energy are we accurately or otherwise reading, and why? So Dorothy has Toto that she takes with her on her journey. In the beginning, of course, we're talking about her being on the farm and her running away from Mrs. Gulch's house. Mrs. Gulch symbolizes the terrible mother. Of course, we have the good mother, the mother who sacrificed her life for her child, the terrible mother, the mother who sacrifices her child for herself, and great mother, of course, who has the child and loves the child in order for the child to experience its divinity identity, guides the child in that direction of knowing that it is dearly loved, divine child of the great Mother, Father, God, who is never judged, condemned, or left alone. So this terrible mother symbol of Miss Gulch is scaring Toto and shooing him off of her property. And so again, this neglect, this rejection, and Dorothy swoops him up in her arms and shouts at Miss Gulch, "You're so mean to Toto." And she promptly goes back home to her other mother, her adoptive mother, Auntie Em and Uncle Henry, who are busy working on the farm, raising small chickens to take to the market, and she's just in the way. Remember just being a nuisance? Ever feel like that? Well, sometimes we do, a lot of times people nudge us out, don't want us around, think we're weird, boring, stupid, uncool. Okay, not everybody, but you know what I mean. We ignore it. We give them the benefit of the doubt. They didn't mean it. Couldn't mean it if they knew how truly marvelous we are. But anyway, we just either play victim or feel sorry for ourselves. And at the end of the day, once again, this rage is just boiling underneath us that shows up in wildly inappropriate ways a lot of times. But because we don't know how to nudge this ickiness out, those feelings of rejection, being misunderstood or unappreciated, people get the wrong idea about us. And that reinforces, again, those negative feelings of shame, blame, and guilt. It's not so much the worthiness or neglect. It's that ickiness of that shame, blame, and guilt always coursing through our sensory organs. And as empaths, it is extremely toxic. So we want to call on the guidance of our angels, guides, and ancestors to help us with that. Just in the midst of feeling those emotions as we are uprooting this rage, working with this primary one of the 8 challenges, we have to ask for help. We can't do it by ourselves. We're blinded by a lot of things. And it's really a cosmic joke. It's we're these old souls, we're empaths, and we have all this experience. But at the same time, there's this cognitive dissonance between really owning that experience and owning that soul awareness of the reality of situations, especially MDT, and putting it on blast. But this is not what we want to do. We want to kind of shift ourselves into it. We want to shift ourselves into it. And that's why it's so important to have a daily practice and to ask for guidance, because you will not go wrong. You'll feel scared on your call to adventure, but you will not go wrong. It is meant to be a disruptive, interrupting, awakening process. So that is the first one, dealing with rage. That's the first of the 8 primary. This is a new moon energy, and we are here with the new moon, Aquarius Pisces, Vedic tropical new moon, as this is being recorded right now, 2 weeks before the lunar eclipse. And so this is a central issue to us being able to resolve the dissonance. We want to, and this is the mission. I mean, should you take it up, the goal is to live in loving detachment, to accept the mother that we have. Okay, to stop wanting her to be something different, to stop wanting her to behave any differently, and to accept that, yes, I'm very angry, I'm very upset that it is not different. But it's not different. It's likely not going to change. It hasn't changed all these years of my life, and I cannot continue to put my life on pause. I need to go on an adventure of healing on my yellow brick road. So the next thing is the second primary challenge that we have with nudging negative self-talk out, of course, is that triggered cognitive dissonance. Now, this is second chakra energy, and the S in aspire, acknowledge is A, is that self-inquiry that gets us past the self-judgment and the self-condemnation, because that is what triggers our cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when you hold a belief And this is that cosmic joke again. You really believe something to be true. You really do believe that Mama loves me, and the way that I need her to love me, the way that I need to feel protected, and I know that she does. I know that she can do it. I know that, she really does care. And then once again, as always, there's behaviors that prove that although love is there, we're not saying love is not there. Love is there. It is not the kind of love that we need. And that's constantly being reinforced. That's cognitive dissonance. To really, really believe, because we have the core belief in the mantra Great Mother gave us. That's why, okay? Again, all together. I am a dearly loved divine child of the Great Mother, Father God, who is never judged, condemned, or left alone. That is our mantra, because we believe it, and we have cognitive dissonance with that because of our experience with MDT not confirming it. That triggers us. And this is what the soul is learning to transcend, not avoid, not go around, not go above, not go under, but go through this lifetime initiation of learning to love ourselves and to have the spiritual independence, our own relationship with Great Mother, our angels, guides, and ancestors, and Great Father. Whatever law that makes sense to us based on our soul experience that will guide us out of this pit. So this is what Great Mother has given to us specifically, but everyone has their own unique thing, and go for it if you have a system that is working for you and this supplements it. Awesome. Because that cognitive dissonance is always being triggered. So what we want to do is we want to go on from the call of adventure into the first threshold, okay? And so that first threshold is when she went off and she walked out of the house, and said, I'm not going to, take this stuff anymore, after Miss Gulch came and followed her back to the farm. And she and Hickory, Huck, and Zeke were out with the pigs, the farm hands, and here she comes to take Toto away and take him to the sheriff. And Aunt Em and Uncle Henry were powerless to do anything about it because the dog had been on her property. And isn't that the truth? Our relatives, they can't do anything about it, can they? Our friends can't do anything about it. And most of them don't acknowledge it if they see it. And if they do, they can't do anything about it, right? It's a soul contract. So the first threshold is one in which we make our first attempt to leave. Some of us may have tried to run away when we were young, or go live with a grandmother or auntie or something like that. And that is the first threshold. It is the resistance and commitment. It is a resistance to the perceived attack, the perceived abandonment and abuse, and it is a commitment to the adventure. So in Dorothy's case, she finds herself walking across the bridge with Toto, taking him and stealing him from the house so Miss Gulch can't get him, and they are off. And she finds herself at a camp with Professor Marvel. He has this tented camp, and he's roasting some hot dogs out there, and Toto promptly comes up and eats them. Her intuition telling her, you get what you need all the time. Your needs are always provided. And this engages a conversation with him, and he is telling all of these tales about being a wizard and traveling the world and doing palm readings and crystal ball readings, and would she like one? And of course she accepts, and he tells her to close her eyes, and as she does, he peeps into her little picnic basket and sees her picture with Aunt Em and tells her all about this woman at home who was crying for her to come home, and she's a very lovely woman, isn't she? And Dorothy feels what? Shame, blame, and guilt, and promptly runs out of the tent back home to find herself taken up into the tornado. Kansas is famous for tornadoes, and that is her first threshold. Threshold dealing with the second primary challenge of nudging negative self-talk out, that cognitive dissonance between knowing that I cannot live here, my intuition toto is not safe. My physical body may not even be safe because of this tornado now. And I don't see any of my caregivers around. What happened to my really cool neighbor who always took care of me after school? What happened to my uncles and aunties? What happened to grandma? Nobody's saying anything. Nobody's saying anything. And so we must be crazy, right? We don't understand, right? And we get so exhausted and so drained from it, our energy is really low. And so on top of it, oftentimes we're called lazy. And so all of these things are very triggering, very triggering. And so how do we deal with that, this road of trials? Well, what we want to do here is we want to observe how we are reinforcing others' ideas of unworthiness. So now realizing it's not that we're lazy, it's that we have been allocating our energy to believing, oh, since no one's around to support me, I must be crazy. So I'm not going to give any energy to my commitment to adventure. Oh, that was a good idea, but I felt so bad. I had to come on home and, but we're still up in the tornado of emotions. We're still up in the whirlwind of cognitive dissonance. And this is where the mental illness comes in. Okay? We're going to talk about mental illness in this series as well. But the third letter and suit of the deck S in Aspire, P rather, the third letter in this P is processing. We have mental illness because we are not processing the messages we're receiving because we don't believe them. We don't believe the message we're receiving from our angels. We don't receive even messages that we're getting from our guides. And they are trying to get in touch with us and our ancestors, but we do not believe them because we are being triggered and we're focusing our energies on managing those triggers. So we may not have the same sensory filters as others, but what we do have is the ability to perceive what our needs are just as deeply as we perceive the needs of others. So when we hear things like we hear a lot of times, we choose to be happy, healthy, and whole. You choose, these emotions that we feel that we're powerless about. In an MDT-centered life, the obstacle, the karma, the soul contract, that is the primary focus, okay? It is healing that, because that is what's zapping our energy. Our dharma is our purpose this lifetime. It is to resolve that. So this is what we are spending all of our energy on so that we can charge ourselves up. We can recharge and we can regain what we need. This means that the capacity that we have to decide where our energy is applied, this energy allocation, is our divinity identity. This is our birthright. This is how we're happy, healthy, and whole. But we have to go back to the root chakra and begin this uprooting. We have to go back to the sacral chakra where we are creating our desires, and we have to actually delve into the self-inquiry of this cognitive dissonance. What is it that I really believe? Am I going to believe my soul? Or am I going to believe everyone else? And these are tough questions to answer. These are very challenging issues to address. But as we do, what happens is we become more acquainted with our triggers. We can lay them out just like the 36 cards in the deck that represent our triggers. There are 49 cards in the deck. 39. They're 36 minor And there are the 7 law cards of the deck. And there are the major arcana, the ASPIRE, and the August card, the angels, guides, and ancestors. And so as we become familiar with this cognitive dissonance, the fear, the rage, the self-mothering, the Pachamama, needing to ground ourselves, and that's what Dorothy was wanting to do. Right when she was taken up in that tornado into the need to process emotions. That takes us to our third major challenge of nudging out negative emotions. And that is what we discussed last week about the hyper versus the highly sensitive. Now, the shadow with the highly sensitive, of course, is the hyper. The hypersensitivity, as we discussed, has to do with the high sensitive person being traumatized and the inability to distinguish between what is real and what is not real. Okay, the difficulty in distinguishing between what is good for us and what is not good for us. Being overly stimulated too much of the time as a norm. And so when we recognize and we can see our triggers coming, we can better process them when they land. This is not about running away from our emotions, because as we see in the third scene of the film, Dorothy entering the Technicolor world of Munchkin Land, she faces Great Mother head on, symbolized by Glinda the Good Witch. And the Munchkins, the angels, guides, and ancestors, the cherubim, and all of the angels, and, all around her. And this represents the unlimited supply of support that we have. So there's no need for us to avoid anything, to have any avoidant behavior at all. However, again, we want to slowly merge ourselves into the acceptance of all of these things, that we can handle them emotionally. Because when we buy into the MDT gospel of shame, blame, and guilt, the survival and coping mechanism, what we miss out on is the part of our hero's journey that takes us through the road of trials and challenges. Okay? After we've entered the threshold, if we're not able to deal with the negativity that we feel is a resounding, unanimous judgment and condemnation of us by our family, by our friends, and now by ourselves, because that's the inner voice that's been cultivated, we don't make it to the road of trials and challenges. Okay? And this begins the yellow brick road in Munchkin Land when they're singing to her, she's off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. She embarks on her healing journey all by herself, with Toto, her intuition. And that is extremely symbolic, because what she's experienced in Munchkin Land is a very traumatic situation that took her into hypersensitivity when the Wicked Witch of the West showed up. Miss Gulch isn't going anywhere. So there's no need to swallow our triggers anymore. There's no need to hide our anger anymore. There's no need to do any of that anymore, because now we know that all it's going to do is show up wearing, as Jan Levant says in her words, a different pair of pants. And that's what Miss Gulch did. She showed up in the witch's costume right there behind her in Munchkin Land and wanted the birthright that Glinda the Good Witch, Great Mother, gave her. Glinda symbolizes the Great Mother, and those red shoes, the blood in this body, in this human body, we have the birthright to stand, to walk in the legacy of health, happiness, and wholeness that she gives all of us. And that is what? what Miss Gold, symbolizing the terrible mother sacrificing her child for herself, wanted for herself. And this is the reality of the situation we must deal with. These competitive mother-child relationships, the challenges that we have to prove that we're worthy, to prove that we love our mothers, and this constant wrangling and criticism and all this that we perceive as normal, but is not healthy for us. And the idea, the perception of even initiating a road of trials is not appealing to us because we have our own road of trials. But you see, it is because we are allocating our energy toward the wrong direction. So what we want to do is we want to begin a kind of self-nurturing and a kind of self-care that calls the soul back into the body. That's trauma, soul dissociation. We want to be able to allocate our energies to things that are going to support our healing as opposed to reinforcing this negative self-talk. So, for example, when we recite our mantra, I am a dearly loved divine child of the great Mother, Father, God, who is never judged, condemned, or left alone. When someone behaves in an uncaring way and they make no bones about it, we can perceive them as uncaring. Okay? We can perceive whether the person actually feels that way or not. Really, depending on the reliability of our intuition, we'll know for sure. But let's just say our accuracy is off often because we're just, dysregulated and our energy is scattered as opposed to being focused on our divinity, focused on our purpose of healing MDT, and we're just scattered around what everybody else needs and what everybody else wants. We're just giving it away, to everybody and not ourselves. Okay, so we've conditioned ourselves to know that is not a judgment or condemnation against us when someone behaves in an uncaring way. We can do something as simple as that in terms of not feeding into the negative self-talk, but holding that energy within ourselves to assert our divinity, identity mantra, and that, hey, this is just a cue. This person's behavior that I'm picking up on, I don't know whether it's right or wrong at this point. I have the capacity to be dead on. But because I'm dysregulated, let me just take this as a cue signaling where I need self-care. What are they showing me? How are they being uncaring? Is it because they forgot to pick up a snack for me to watch TV tonight at the store? Or did they forget to pick me up on the way somewhere? Or did they ignore me when I said something? Okay, so maybe I need to listen more to what I'm saying. Maybe I need to get my own snacks. Maybe I need to change the snack I've been getting. Maybe the snack they were going to get is something that I should just kind of let go of and start going toward another direction. Maybe I should go to where I needed to go and get a ride with somebody else, or not go at all, or go someplace else. That's a simple way to process the emotion around negative self-talk. Always push the reset button when negative self-talk comes up. And this brings us to integrity, the I of the suit, and our last for part one of the challenges to nudging negative self-talk out. This has to do with the part of the hero's journey when Dorothy makes her way into the land of Oz through the road of trials, challenges, and temptations. This road of trials has challenges as she becomes acquainted with the Scarecrow, the Tin Man and the Lion. And Miss Gulch, again in the form of the Wicked Witch of the West, makes another appearance to destroy her in the process of making her way onto Oz, which Glinda the Good Witch has told her will tell her the way home, tell her the word, the law, the logos. That's great father energy. So the reset button in this suit, the purify button, the cleansing button, has to do with us being able to accept that with our intuitions, we always want our first thought to be what we trust. In the beginning, as we are developing it, whatever question we have, whatever concern we have as we're going through our processing, do I need to do another snack? Do I need to go someplace else or have someone else pick me up? These very simple, practical things is where we get into the heart of developing our integrity. That is the I in the Aspire suit, our truth as it aligns with our higher truth. We always want to go with our first thought, which is really a function of our first download about something. And it's usually a really quick, simple, soft voice that tells us something really easy. But what happens, especially with us, is that the rational mind comes through with that conditioning that must be wrong. That's crazy. You're way too sensitive. You shouldn't even be thinking about having another snack just because that made you think that maybe something like that has too much sugar and you need to go get something else with sugar. They just forgot to get what you need and they never care about you. And then we get back into the loop. Okay? So the first thought in that type of a situation, well, yeah, you should go get your own snack because that particular one might have a little bit more sugar. That might be why you're a little bit more inflamed. Get something with just a little less sugar. You ain't got to go crazy all out health nut, but this is incremental. All of this is very incremental. And so with the fourth challenge of negative self-talk being trigger looping, what we're saying is that this loop is not recognizing or releasing the lessons that we're learning. And we're picking up lessons every time we're triggered. Every time we're triggered, if we don't stop and pause the situation and say, where is this trigger showing me I need to love myself? Then we're missing the whole game with nudging negative self-talk out. We want to take those triggers as the signals they're intended. We are never judged, condemned, or left alone. I know that a trigger that I work with now is my time in waking up. And I know I've mentioned this before. I feel like I need to wake up several hours earlier than I do. And I do get up. But I cannot get out of the bed. And I am in Saturn Mahadasha, and that's notorious. It's a period in Vedic astrology where planets have a greater influence in your life. And I'm in the period where Saturn has greater influence in your life. And it's a very heavy planet. It's a very heavy energy. And I feel really triggered about that when I don't. And it's just really hard for me to do it. But with this practice, I ask myself, where is it that I need to be loved right now with not getting out of the bed? And invariably it has been, you need rest. You just need rest. You just need rest. You really do need to rest. And at first I felt like I was just kind of kidding myself. And I was like, because the fourth suit also has to deal with, we talked about magical thinking in hypersensitivity and high sensitivity last week, but it's also fantasy thinking about the mother, would be, could be, should be, and spiritual bypass. pretending to have a level of spiritual maturity that is unearned. We earned every step of our spiritual maturity. So saying that we are old souls is not just some flippant statement that's being made. We've earned through many lifetimes the sensitivity that we have, and we earned through these stripes of living with people who are learning sensitivity, how to become more sensitive and how to be more compassionate. It's not a game. It's not easy. But as we do that, it comes around to confirm the mantra, because it wasn't silly. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that I have been waking up a lot during the night. I haven't been sleeping all the way through the night. And I am tired. It would be different if I was sleeping all the way through the night and I was still wanting to sleep some extra hours. Yeah. And that's how it's been my whole life. And so I wasn't taking into account that over these last several months, I have not been sleeping through the night. But it took years of practice with the divinity identity mantra to stick with the mantra, the truth of it. And I am not lying to myself. I am working the method, the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck. I am working what Great Mother said. And she said, I'm never judged, condemned, or left alone. And I just couldn't do it. So I had to work with that trigger in a self-loving way. And instead of judging and condemning myself, like what would be the norm, you lazy, you're not getting up, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Nah, let's put a pin in that. I'm tired. A more loving allocation of my energy would be to recognize I need rest. That's how we stop the trauma looping. And that is the fourth step of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which our heroine, Dorothy, illustrates in The Wizard of Oz for us. All of these signs and symbols, we're going to go through them as we continue with part 2 and continuing on with how we use our intuition as well, the shadows and the shadow work that work with our integrity. Really recognizing that we are in that loop and that we don't want trauma, our triggers, or our tailspins to be blocked. We want to tell ourselves the truth about how we're feeling. We want to allow those feelings to come up, because as we do each and every time and reset it to self-love, we're pulling up a root of rage, which is the central core issue behind our negative self-talk. But instead of turning that anger inward toward ourselves and becoming depressed, that's depression. When we turn the anger inward, it's the depression. And that's why Great Mother and my Agas, my angels, guides, and ancestors give us such lively tunes and music to sing and that sort of thing, because we want to do things, paint, dance, drum, walk, just get that abdomen jiggling, get that oxygen, breathe. Sometimes we can't do anything but just breathe. We have to get the energy going. Those red shoes, we have to walk on that yellow brick road. Get it going, get it flowing. As we take one step, our angels, guides, and ancestors do what? They take 2. They can help us even more. With our P processing, we're going through and we're dealing with the threshold of resistance and commitment. There's resistance on one side and our commitment on the other. Who is going to win out? What our soul says or what others say about us? And that's a decision we have to make each and every day, each and every way, even to the point of when we get out of the bed finally. And this is something I still have to work on, but just reminding myself, and the rest of my morning flows beautifully when I do. Take care of myself first. And as empaths, we know people love to interrupt us because our time and our energy isn't important, right? That's what we've taught people. That's what we've been conditioned to be and do. With our sensitivity and our compassion, we have been more than willing to. But as we begin to course correct, it's very important that when we wake up, especially, that we brush our teeth, that we clean ourselves, that we wash our face, that we make our breakfast and take our time, and all of these things as uninterrupted as possible. And we do the shadow work of speaking the no's and the next time and at this time. And in the past, I know I have, and I understand that's something I've done in the past, but this is what I'm doing now. All of that language, this is when we have the wherewithal to allocate our energy towards that in our healing process and trusting the process of daily soul alignment. We know that in conclusion, when we're working with self-inquiry, we're working with that cognitive dissonance to resolve the divinity identity with our MDT, and we're uprooting that rage, that what the challenge is that irrational conditioning voice is louder than the internal voice that's growing. So if it's useful to you to learn about a healing process that is effective, that can be applied at any time, and was specifically downloaded to Mother Moon Empaths to heal MDT, the tips, tools, and techniques I'm sharing with you that assist throughout this path, then we know it's not an easy task, even when you know these things. But if you can understand the many times along the healing journey where it will feel like you're healed, but you're not completely healed, you don't have to loop back into the rage and the frustration. There's a deck with a loving message from Great Mother that's going to encourage you to do the healing cycle as opposed to the toxic loop. I mean, hey, I can tell you, I felt like I was healed so many times from MDT over the past 20 years. I mean, I can tell you, I found myself within weeks or months or even years of going right back to what felt like ground zero MDT acknowledgement. And it was a blessing to be able to locate myself. Okay, so am I running back to the farmhouse? Am I in Munchkin Land? Am I in Oz? Am I in the witch's castle, which we're going to talk about next time? You know, am I in the balloon with Oz? You know, am I, in Oz's castle? You know, where am I right now in this, so that I could see myself relative to the 3 clicks of my heels back home. That health, happiness, and wholeness back home. Okay, this is a normal part of the healing process, and that's that unraveling of the onion, so to speak, going deeper and deeper and deeper into the wound, into the soil to uproot the rage. Okay? And so sometimes we are there longer than we need to be when we do not know the difference between the toxic loop and the healing cycle, the lunar cycles, that new moon that gives us that fallow ground to respond to the call to adventure. The balsamic moon before that, which is the download of acknowledgement, release, denial is the law. The download of self-inquiry and the law of divine Father, and then processing, which is the law of divine Mother. And we have these repetitive patterns, these monkey wrenches that are thrown into things. And so accepting that the rage is about letting go of what we want, that desire attachment, attached to things being the way we think they should be, they could be, they would be, in an unwillingness to accept things as they are. And the primary thing, lucky for us to accept, is that we are what? Dearly loved, divine children of the great Mother, Father God, who are never judged, condemned, or left alone. That is Great Mother's message for us. I really hope that those tools for shadow work come in handy for those of you who are wanting to nudge negative self-talk out. They really do work if you work them. It's not about perfection or being above reproach or any of that stuff. It's just about the energy allocation, the shadow. We know that there's a kind of karma that we're dealing with, but we have power, we have energy, we have the power to decide how we manage our emotional space. And so in these 8 phases, the law being the 3rd quarter, release that shadow work. We're going to use the technique for each stage, and we'll continue with stages 4 through 8 next time. In the meantime, in between time, remember, Great Mother loves you, and I do too.
Divine being, truly are divine, incredible, divine, intelligent, truly are divine. Can't you see? Divine being, truly are. Truly are divine, divine being, truly are incredible, divine, divine being, beautiful, divine. Can't you see? Divine being, truly are divine. Divine being,